You're like, Bo, you've done a lot of elk hunting.
Yeah.
I guess is the closest you could get to elk hunting deer is by doing something like that and trying to like call them in off the ground and kind of slip hunt. Again, they're not bugling back at you. Maybe every now and then they're grunting back at you. But that's it. But it's like, I could see how that could work and you could cover ground and check a lot of those bigger cuts like that. Bo, have you ever tried this hunting style?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I have. I've one thing that actually that's just how I shot my deer last year was this style of hunting, and I'll get into that. But one of the things how I've used it was even during the rut and talking about either patience or with an issue with patience being younger, or even now with just being wore out. If you spend 7-10 days, say you have time off of work, or now I have more time available, so I could spend 2 weeks sitting dark to dark, and deer hunting's super fun, but that's tough. And so a lot of times I've realized that my encounters are more mid-morning to midday, so I'll go in, I'll leave the truck at daylight, sleep in an extra hour or two, and then just still hunt my way in to where I'm going to go hunt at, and then climb up into the tree. But last year that the situation was, I did that in New York in 2021 as well. But last year I was sitting on the edge of this cut for 3 or 4 days, had an encounter with a giant deer where my bow was on the ground, and that's a whole nother story. But I noticed all of a sudden hunting pressure was on the outside of that cut too. There was other people within 100 yards of me, and I was just getting frustrated, but I knew those bucks were there. And I'm like, they're got to be in there. And then the wind speeds at noon went from like next to nothing up above 20 miles per hour. So I climbed down, had my sticks, platform, saddle, everything on my back, and I just got the wind kind of in my face, a little bit crosswind, and I just walked the edge of the cut until I found something that made me want to go in. And I'd looked on the map, and I could see, because when you look at giant cuts especially, they're almost like their own ecosystems. They're not all the same thickness across the board. So I looked and I saw this different color variation. I hadn't been in this part of the cut at all before, but I could see that there was a line. So my goal was to get there. And actually, when I got towards the end, there was a fresh rub that was, a beech sapling that was just tore off, and I'm like, he's in here, I'm like, yeah, all right. It smelled like a rutting buck. I'm like, all right, this is where I'm going in. And I started going through, and it was way thicker than I wanted it to be. And I'm like, I'm making noise that even though it was windy, I was making more noise than I wanted to. And I got in there, and I remember I just got on this opening. I kind of tripped and hit there, and I hear hoofs, bound off, but not like full on run. And I'm like, but it sounded like a couple of them. I was like, I wonder if it's a buck and a doe in here. It was November 1st. And I was like, all right. So I just did a couple of soft grunts, nothing. And I just slipped along, and I looked on the map, and I saw, this is how thick it was. I couldn't see what was 20 yards in front of me, and I saw that there looked like there was a little opening. I said, I'm going to get to that, have my back against the cover, and just sit there for a while. And I got in there, and it was 5-10 minutes, and I remember looking, I'm like, oh, that's actually a good tree. I said, maybe I'll just climb up in that, and I could see a little bit more and hunt. And I was thinking about it, and I just did one. I can't remember if I grunted or if I was just being quiet at that point, but I'd grunted, 10 minutes before that. And then all of a sudden I heard coming, and I was like, and I saw a movement coming through the brush, and I looked, and it was a doe, and she's just kind of browsing, but moving kind of quickly and browsing as she's going. And then all of a sudden I saw the buck coming behind her, and he's just kind of coming through, and he just stopped browsing, and I drew back, and it was only a 10 or 11 yard shot. And he was, I had a baseball size hole to shoot through, and he was quartering to me. So I just put it right on his shoulder, and I shot, and it went through there, and he ran, and it was, again, windy, thick. I didn't know what happened at that point. And it's funny. I went and grabbed my arrow. I waited about 20 minutes. Even though it was that close, I just wanted to give it a little bit of time in case something else happened. But I was like, I either missed him or I killed him with the shot that I had. And it sounded good, so I went in there and I see my arrow sticking into a tree behind where he was at, and there was meat thrown on the tree, and I was like, that doesn't look good. And I didn't see any blood there at first, so I'm like, uh-oh. And I just kept being like, there's no other way other than hitting through there. And with the angle, I was like, I was aiming at the shoulder, so yeah, there probably is meat that, went flying, and I'm shooting a pretty sizable fixed blade. So, I mean, I just started walking there. I remember I started going, I'm like, this is the direction I saw him go. And I started walking. I'm like, no, go back, find blood. And I'm like, all right, just settle down, all worked up, adrenaline. And I turned around and look, and he's laying right there. He only went 12 yards and piled up and ended up passing right through him. But that was a, perfect example of going through and slipping through those cuts and doing that. And I think now even more so, I like using it with what he was talking about with the opening day of like, or just in the season when you're trying to find sign of multi-purposing, like you're scouting, but you're also still hunting at the same time. So
that's interesting. We have, that's a really good point about those cuts not being all the same, especially the bigger ones. Even down in South Alabama, we used to hunt this place that had a very large cut. It was like 200 acres or something. And they would burn it, and there would be fire shadows in it where the fire would burn off the side of a hill, and there'd be a spot, maybe it was a little more moist or something, where it just wouldn't burn that well. And so most of the cut was like pine trees with some grasses, but those fire shadows would be thick saplings. And every time you hit one of those fire shadows, there'd be sign running along the edge of it. And what we found was the deer were running those fire shadows, and they were kind of using that edge within the cut to get around in there. But one thing that both of y'all mentioned is going into these cuts, easing in there, you basically, it sounds like you jump the deer and you hear it kind of trot off, and then you're calling it back in. Am I hearing that right?
I mean, I definitely, for his, well, I don't know about his scenario. It might have just been, he might have heard it chasing that doe or dogging that doe. But I know, for mine, that for opening day, I definitely jumped that deer. I think the other times, though, during that late October, early November, I think they're just cruising the clear cut looking for doe. But actually, I can think of a couple other bucks that I've killed. I think I did get them out of their bed because it was warm. One instance was like 11 o'clock in the morning when I shot this buck, and it was already 65 probably by then, and which is kind of warm for that time of year. And I think that buck was definitely bedded down, and I didn't see any other deer around, and I think I did grunt him out of his bed, Daryl. I don't know if I jumped him out of his bed, but I think I grunted him up out of his bed.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I don't know if I've really thought about that as much before, but I just think that when I bump them, especially like he said with his situation, same with mine, like the wind was good, and it's like they're kind of curious creatures, and when they just hear something, and especially when it's when it's windy out like that, there's sticks falling out of the tree, there's things happening, so they're kind of a little bit on edge, but they can't jump it and get too worked up over everything, because otherwise they'll never get any rest during the day when that's going on. So that's kind of how I've looked at it, of not worrying as much about that. If it happens, I don't think I'll throw my hands up, turn around, and leave.
Yeah, if the wind's in your favor, like he said, they're going to jump up and they're on alert. But then if they hear what sounds like a deer, well, they may come to you instead of going the other way.
And that's where it comes in, where you need good conditions, so you're not just plowing through there being super loud. Like, you got to have the right conditions to actually make this work.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's some forgiveness too. I think it all comes down to the deer's temperament. I can remember one morning, it wasn't light yet. I'm trying to make my way. I had to be on the other side of the clear cut, and I was going to climb a tree with my climber. And the way I had to access it was I had to walk this gas line down on the far end of it, and then there was like it was two cuts. One was maybe a 30-year-old or 25-year-old cut, and this one was probably a 10-year-old cut. And I would hit that seam and walk through the older cut and make it to the other side, and then I'd get to my tree. Well, I got kind of screwed up, and I ended up back into the newer cut with my climber on my back, and now it's getting, I should be at the base of the tree by now, and it's still 20 minutes to half hour, maybe even longer till daylight. And I'm just getting mad because I can't find my way out, and and I had a GPS then, and it's just, I think I wasn't getting good reception because of the overgrowth, so I'm trying to find my way out, and pretty soon I'm just plowing through, and my stand's banging and that, and all of a sudden I just hear this roar, and I'm getting close to the edge because from the skyline I could see the bigger trees, so I was getting close to breaking out, probably within 80 yards of breaking out, and I'm thinking, dang, that had to be a guy. I said he had to hear me, and he's letting me know he's there. But I'm thinking, there's hardly any. The access to here is, they would have to come in the way I did. I can't see somebody coming the other way. But I'm thinking, oh, maybe, so I'm just kind of thinking, it's like, I don't know. So it's like, well, I actually pulled a flashlight out and I started flashing it into the tree line in that direction, thinking somebody would flash back if it was a guy. Nobody did. It's like, huh. It's like, well, I'm just going to go to, start heading that way, and I got to get out of here anyways. So start moving again and bang around some more stuff, and all of a sudden this roar lets out again. It's like, oh no, that's on the ground, and he's close. So I just froze, and I'm waiting until daylight. I don't want him attacking me. I mean, you do hear occasional story of this.
What kind of deer do y'all have in Pennsylvania? Oh my gosh! You're clanging and banging. That dude's roaring at you.
Yeah. He's like, get out of my thicket.
Okay, keep going.
So as it's getting lighter, I could see like a little opening, maybe 10 yards out. So I think, if I can get to there, I'm gonna start grunting and see if he's still around. I haven't heard him since then. So another maybe 10, 15 minutes hadn't gone by, and I start creeping, and now I'm being quiet because I don't want him before I'm ready to come in. And I get to the edge of that opening, and it wasn't much of an opening. I mean, it was like a 5-yard shot, but I'm thinking, I got to try something. He's in here, and before I blow him out, so I pull out my grunt call, got my arrow knocked, had to slid my stand off my back, and just got ready, and I hit the grunt call, and here he comes. And, he comes busting through, and he stops. And this would have been probably the only broadside shot I would have had in a situation as far as grunting one in a clear cut. And, and at that time, I always practiced with both eyes open. It seems like I'm more accurate. Well, in that low light condition, it was light enough, legally light enough to shoot, but when I shot, I think I had a real small peep too. Well, I ended up missing the deer completely. Long story short, I thought I drilled him. He took off running, and seen my arrow stuck in a tree, behind. I get up there, there's nothing on. It's like, you got to be kidding me. So then I start taking up his track. Well, I didn't hear him crash either. I started taking up his track, and there's no blood, nothing. And then I did play around after that. Looking with both eyes and then closing my eye with my peep, and sure enough, that target shifts. But yeah, it's so it depends on the temperament of the deer as far as how aggressive you can get, or some of them will come into.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just that it could just be that day, just if he's just like. There's certain days that deer just want to die, and like that's the days you want to hit, and it's not often that you can find that.
They get so fired up, they just want to rip something up.
This is interesting. We're talking about this, especially like the bigger, kind of slightly older clear cuts, like stuff you can kind of slip through is really brushy, but there's bigger saplings, or like down by us be pines that 4 or 5 inches diameter where you can slip through them and get in little openings. Because that's some of the areas I see the biggest sign back home in Alabama. You'll go in there and you'll find there'll be like one pine tree in that spot that's a little bit bigger than the rest, and maybe it's 6 inches diameter, and it's destroyed, bleeding, destroyed. You're like, how am I going to hunt this deer? It's a bow hunt.
Yeah.
We don't have a gun hunt for another week and a half. Like, you're going to have to hunt them off the ground. Mm-hmm. And like, I just feel so exposed on the ground. But to be honest, this is like Bo, you've done a lot of elk hunting.
Yeah.
I guess is the closest you could get to elk hunting deer is by doing something like that and trying to like call them in off the ground and kind of slip hunt. Again, they're not bugling back at you. Maybe every now and then they're grunting back at you, but that's it. But it's like, I could see how that could work, and you could cover ground and check a lot of those bigger cuts like that, and working with a headwind or maybe a slight crosswind, and just trying to cover some ground. Because worst case scenario, you jump them. It's like, okay, I got I got 6 other cuts I could go walk that are each 50 acres apiece.
And they've got grouse hunters. They've got everything else that are going through those cuts. Like, it's not the end of the world with it. I mean, I was in a spot yesterday, just like this type of scenario, several 100-acre cut, but there's different, maybe the slope aspect had, more sun to it. So that growth is coming up more, where this side just grasses. And like, what you were talking about when you said that, Andrew, I was like, those scenarios are very, very similar to a lot of the cuts we have here, where you'll have these different variations, or maybe this corner's got a lot of briars depending on what the sun is doing, and maybe some more, maple or oak saplings that the deer are feeding on, versus over here being beech and cherry that they don't want to eat as much. So you can look at these, these big cuts and narrow them down a little bit more, and how you're working them, or an SMZ that goes, through there. So like those types of things. But when I was in a spot yesterday, and I showed you guys, I showed you a picture of this deer I already got on camera. It was a really big deer, but I used to hunt that spot before, in the tree that I used to hunt out of. It's grown up so much that you can't shoot to this grape, and you can't really shoot anything from it, and the tree's like pretty much dead. And I now I've got older, I don't hunt out of those types of trees anymore. but I was looking at it, and Justin, who was here filming, he's like, how would you do this? I was like, I'm gonna have to be on the ground. Like, there's whether it's sitting on the ground or kind of still hunting through or doing something, but it's some of those scenarios to hunt those deer, you just can't get in the tree. And if you can't cut, say you can't cut shooting lanes or do anything, whether it's public or whether it's timber company property that you're not allowed doing that, you got to work with what you have. And it doesn't matter if you got a little lightweight saddle and you can get in any tree or whatever. That doesn't matter when you can't shoot, as far as having shots. Where you get down on ground level, you have more openness and the ability to shoot under some of that stuff. So
yeah, and I've tried to get in a saddle or a small lock on in some of those cuts where like trees are 4 inches, maybe 5 inches diameter, and you're only getting, like, you're not even getting a stick high. Like, you're just hanging the platform knee high, maybe thigh high, and you're stepping up on it. But then you get up on there and you're like, this is worse off than if I was just standing on the ground or sitting on the platform on the tree, 18 inches up the tree. Because you can see better. The overhanging limbs are like eye level or maybe just above eye level in that stuff. But if you're, a little bit lower, just staying there, you can kind of shoot underneath a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. That's why I like having like a bigger platform, and taking, like, if you have like a little pad or even one that you use for your knees, or just like a ground pad, putting it on it and putting it on the ground and sitting on it. And then if also you could, put your saddle at ground level as far as comfort, because I cannot sit on the ground. To like my knees hurt, I'm like moving around more, so trying to make yourself comfortable if you're sitting in those types of
if I'm gonna post in a clear cut, because there's no trees to climb, doing what he says, putting even if your platform's a foot off the ground, if you go through the effort to put it there, you're going to tend to stay there. Where if you're just going to stand by that that small tree, and after 10, 15 minutes, you want to move.